Tonight, Bob Davidson is going to be our guest here, talking about laser cutting, which he does regularly as part of his profession. So, Bob, welcome.
Thanks again, Jim. Good to be back. It seems like it's been forever. Um, Actually, we actually don't do any laser work at work. We do job some out. We do industrial metal laser cutting with a local company. Um, but again, I'm going to jump in here and share a screen and get this thing started. Everybody see this technology series?
Yep.
Um,
Yes.
Sherry is a lot more knowledgeable than I, and she put together a few slides, and I'm just going to go through them and basically read them along with you. Um, so she talks about what to consider when choosing a laser cutter. Um, Obviously, material type of thickness. There are different. Basically, laser cutters are rated in terms of watts of what the output is of the actual laser head. The small ones that most of us will be dealing with are 5, 10, or 20 watt. There are 40 watt. There are industrial ones that go way above that. And there are different types of lasers. She references CO2 lasers. There's fiber lasers. So, there's a lot. There are lasers, as she said, they use to cut steel and aluminum. Um, what I do at home is all wood, and it's all thin wood. Um, Friends of mine are using this to do etching on, mugs and water cups and things like that. So there's a lot of different things that will go into deciding what type of laser you want to get if you decide to get one. Precision and quality, production speed. Again, I'm not doing this as a business. Um, and then the initial investment budget, and I'll talk a little bit about that during my presentation. Costs, frankly, for the home-based lasers, the operating costs are negligible. For larger ones, you get into where you need to have gas mixtures for them to aid in cooling. You can get into some pretty significant utility costs as well. Intended applications, again, I'll talk a little bit more about this in a second. Power consumption, again, CO2 lasers, the larger industrial lasers tend to can get up there in terms of electrical requirements. Some are water cooled. There's gas environments involved. So, and then obviously the larger the laser, the larger the space it takes up. So this was kind of Sherry's introduction to this. And what I'm going to talk about tonight is just laser cutting basics for model railroading. And I chose this picture as the background. Those of you who a couple years ago saw the episode I did on building my elevated railway, elevated subway, which is an oxymoron, I know. This is all an ITLA kit, ITLA kit out of Canada. Nick Massey's been on the show. He's a great guy. It's a phenomenal company. And all of his stuff is laser cut. And so many of the kits that we see nowadays are laser cut. And I just got an interest in it. And frankly, one of my business partners got one at home. And he said, you should get one too and play with it. So I said, oh boy. So that started the money flowing. Anyway, one thing that I want to point out up front is that laser cutting, the process is transformative, not creative. So unlike filament printing or resin printing, we're not actually building something up. We are taking a product and we're going to transform it into something else. You should have, if you want to be successful at this, you should have an understanding of both raster imaging, which is Photoshop or photographs, and vector, which is straight line, geometric drawing, or Illustrator, which is the program I use, files. It's going to be very helpful. And I will say there is a moderate to a high initial investment. As with everything else technological, the costs are coming way down. The laser that I bought, which was close to $900, is now down to $600. So the transformative process, you can cut, you can score, or you can engrave or etch. So those are really the three things that you can do with a laser cutter. Cutting, typically we're going to be using something out of Illustrator or Inkscape or one of those vector programs. Same with scoring. Difference between cutting and scoring. Cutting, we're going through the material. Scoring, we're actually etching a line or a geometric shape into the material. Engraving or etching involves transferring an image onto the material. And that's where you're going to use Photoshop or another image editing piece of software. Initial investment. You need a laser cutter. If you're cutting anything, it makes smoke. And believe me, it makes a lot of smoke. So you're going to need an exhaust enclosure with fans and ducting. A lot of people that I know that do this put it in their garage, and it still stinks up the joint. And then you have to decide what material you want to use for whatever it is that you're going to be fabricating. This is the laser that I got. It's an X-Tool. It's a 10-watt laser. The bed is about usable space on the bed is about 18 inches square. The actual unit itself is about 24 inches square. You can see on the enclosure on the right, there's a window to look into. And let me just spend a few seconds on safety. This is a laser. You don't look at it. You will go blind. You can also see here there's an exhaust port. The X-Tool cover comes with a fan built into it. And then there's an exhaust hose. It's a 3-inch exhaust hose that comes out. There's a little slot on the side to hold some tools and stuff. This basically opens up so you can put your material inside and then start the process. This is what I rigged up in my basement to boost the exhaust out of the laser cutter. I had an existing line for my spray booth, so I put in some gates and a Y connector and basically brought out another, here's a little better picture of it, brought out another hose that goes through this booster fan, and that goes out. When we had windows replaced in my basement, I had to put a dryer vent in. So I use a 4-inch dryer vent to exhaust everything outside. So this works really well for doing that. I will say that sometimes I open up both gates and I'll run the exhaust fan from my paint booth just to help get even more air going through the system. I can cut now downstairs and you don't smell it. So that's made my wife very happy. So initial investment, the material, I'm going to just jump into my web. MakerStock, if you recall when I was doing my little shop stuff, MakerStock is a great resource, even if you're not using laser, because one of the things that they have is this thin birch, and you can get this stuff. Here's this Koski ply. It's an AB birch ply, and they have it as thin as 0.6 millimeters.
Okay.
They have anywhere from 0.6 up to 3/32. So they just have some great stuff. They also have a lot of plastics, metal, etc. They have hardwoods and MDF. I used quite a bit of MDF. So I really recommend this MakerStock. Their prices are pretty reasonable, and they ship right to you. It's a good deal. So I thought I would just take you through a project or a couple of projects and show you some things that I've done. First thing you're going to do is create the files. So you're going to be doing drawings. So this is, but what you're going to be drawing are components. So I do not typically use my modeling, my 3D modeling program as I would for my filament printer or my resin printer. I'm using two-dimensional things. I'm using Illustrator or Inkscape or Photoshop. We're then going to export that file as a PNG, DXF. There's a lot of different types of files that you can use that you will import into the cutting software. So the Xtool cutter that I have came with a software package called the Xtool Creative Suite. And then we're going to do a test and we're going to cut it. So here's an example of, this was one of the first projects. I think I did this in a MyBuild about a year ago before I had it together. This is an actual photograph of the sign in Brooklyn. My layout is based in Brooklyn, New York. And on top of their factory for many years, this was an iconic sign in Brooklyn, the Ken Tile flooring sign. It was just, it's a monster. And I wanted to model this and put it on top of one of the buildings eventually, whenever I get around to it, on the layout. So what I did was working in, this is a screen capture of an Illustrator file. I laid out the face, so you can see this is the face of the unit. And through doing some testing, I was able to get down, these lines are 0.5 millimeters wide. So I can't tell you what that scales up to. It's about 3 inches, I think, in HO. So this was the main face frame. These were the supporting trusses, and then just a bunch of flat stock to hold everything together. So this is how I exported everything. These were some cross braces. And then here it is when I brought it into the Xtool Creative Space. So you can scale it within the space. There's a whole lot. I'm not going to get into the details. If you decide you want me to come back and talk about this in the future, I'm happy to. Oh, did I just screw up my thing? Did I stop my share?
No?
Oh, okay, good. Over here on the right, there are you can decide whether you want to score, engrave, or cut. Settings, the program comes with a good deal of predefined settings for different materials. You can do it manually. You can set your power percentage from 0 up to 100 or 1 to 100. You can set the speed and you can set the number of passes. I believe to cut this stuff, I was using 75% power. I was going at 9 millimeters a second, and I made 2 passes to get a clean cut. Here is the trusses and the just flat stock brought into that same program. And here you can see this is what they came out like. So these were all cut out. It cuts really cleanly. You actually do get a burn edge on it. You just wipe them down with some alcohol very carefully. Again, this is 0.5 millimeters. This is on 0.8 millimeter thick goods.
Okay.
But you really get some fine detail on them. This is how I did the letters. So I cut the letters out of that same 0.8 millimeter, and then I used 2 millimeter MDF to make the boxes because I wanted to do them as box letters. Here you can see, then I went back with and I'm a terrible photographer. It looks a lot better than real. I used my filament printer and actually printed out neon tubes to go into all the letters. And then here you can see this is assembled. Again, I'm a miserable photographer, but there's the actual sign assembled, and I haven't done any weathering on it yet, but that's painted and assembled. So So that was just one of the first projects that I did with this. Some of you might remember I did this for Father Ron. He had built this movie theater, and I show this because this is where I did. If you could see, some of these lines are black. Those are the cut lines, and what you see is green here. Those are engraved lines. So I actually took these letters and moved them off. They were cut separately, but then I cut this outline of the sign and then engraved all these little rivets, or they're actually meant to be light bulbs. And here's what that sign came out like.
Hmm.
And I believe Ron has it on his Palace Theater model. Another one I did, and I think actually Father Ron showed last week, Itla makes a fire escape. I wanted to modify it a little bit. So I did all these parts and etc. for fire escapes. And so it's a lot of fun. It takes time. You have to go, you do, but once you set up the parameters for cutting or etching a particular material, you can always go back to that. It doesn't change. So it's a pretty cool thing to use. So that's the end of my little presentation. Are there any questions?
Hey, Bob, this is Bob Geldmacher. You mentioned alcohol on the burn edge. Could you
Yes.
talk more about that?
Yeah, I just rub it down after it's cut. You'll see, you'll get it all over your fingers. It's just to clean it up. So I just
Okay.
take I actually use
Just a minute.
I use a Q-tip,
Mhm.
and actually found these in the beauty in the dollar store. I got like 300 of them.
Mhm.
They're made for makeup application. So they have these pointy ends on them, and they're really cool. You can dip them right in the alcohol and then just wipe around the edges. It just gets the soot off of it.
Okay. Does it clear it up, almost like clear wood, or does it still have a little bit of a burn look?
No, it will be dark. It will be dark.
Okay, good.
Bob, Alan Rogers here. I don't have a question, just a comment. I've got an older machine from 2008, and it has to have a 32-bit computer to send the files over to it. But another thing I found, I have to send my engraving files separately from my cutting files. And I don't know if newer machines, if you can do everything at once and it just goes from one to the other. But in my particular case, AI would crash because it couldn't get everything over there.
Yeah, the new ones actually do it all in one shot. So like that sign for Father Ron, as I said, I moved the letters off because that was just a straight cut, but it did the engraving of all the light bulbs and the detailing, and then immediately switched into the cut and did the cutout. Yeah, it's the new software, and actually they just upgraded the software. It really is pretty basic. The one thing that there's some really good YouTube videos on getting set up. One of the things that folks do is they create a little matrix, 10% power up to 100% power, and then speed. And you take a piece and you'll actually do a little sample on a particular piece of material, and that'll show you how deep the engraving might go and things like that. But if you ever happen to get an ITLA kit, just take a minute and look at how detailed Nick gets with leaving little microscopic tabs that hold all the parts together so they don't fall out of the sheet. And it's just incredible. And that's what got me interested in doing this. But I've done some other things. I've done some railings for some platforming and stuff like that. It's just a ton of fun. It's a ton of fun. And now, like I say, nowadays, I know on Xtool you can go up and buy that same machine with the head, with a 10-watt head and with the enclosure, and I think that it was on sale for $600.
Hmm.
And it comes with the software.
Bob, have you ever used Lightburn?
Yes, Lightburn is the Cadillac of the processing software. But frankly, I got into it, I started using it, and then Xtool upgraded theirs, and it pretty much, for what I'm using it for, since I'm not really doing real high production stuff, I just use the Xtool one.
Hmm.
The nice thing now too is it's all via Wi-Fi. So I don't even have to move a disk over, or, you know, a little micro USB or anything.
Mhm.
It's just Wi-Fi's right into the cutter. And it is relatively fast. If you look at like the all the parts to make that fire escape, I think that was a 9-minute cut.
Wow.
Jeez.
So like I say, in the future, I'd be happy to get into a lot more specifics, details on it, but I thought for tonight, really just I know Greg complained when I started telling him to buy $8 tools, so I don't want to screw people up with $600 laser cutters. Any other questions?
I
Hey,
I
Bob,
will.
I just had one quick question. Have you tried or had any luck doing anything smaller than HO scale? Because I've
Well,
had some
again,
people that attempted to make me fire escapes with N scale, and they just didn't have a lot of luck.
yeah. Again, go to ITLA. That's Nick Massey's company. They have N-scale fire escapes. It's ITLA scale ITLA and I'm going to his site right now. And I'm almost positive he has N scale. I've gone as thin as 0.3 millimeters cutting. That's actually what the rails are on the fire escape. The upright, the verticals are 0.3 millimeter. I'm sure with some, again, and I'm using a pretty cheap laser. I would assume that with what Nick is using, he can probably get even smaller than that.
Yeah, that
Bob,
was basically what my question was going to be, because just purchasing them is so expensive because I'm going to
Yeah.
need hundreds and hundreds. So I figured if I
Yeah,
bought one of
Yeah.
these, learned how to use it, it might, I could learn some things and save a little money as well in the process.
sure. Yeah, let me see if I can find out what they are.
Bob, have
Uh,
you tried cutting any styrene?
I have not. No, I have not.
Yeah.
So he does, you can get a set of 3 N-scale fire escapes with the ladders and everything for $13 from ITLA. Like I say, his style was just a little bit different than the New York style that I wanted. So it's pretty cool.
Well, everything you did looks incredible.
Oh, thank you. I have fun. When I have time, I have fun.
Well, I hope you'll come back and show us some more stuff because I think
Yeah.
it's fast. I really do.
Well, you'll be seeing some stuff in some upcoming my builds. So
Sounds good. Anybody have any more questions for Bob?
Well, speaking of my builds, I guess production wise, for doing laser kits and all that, I think that would be getting Chris Corse's thoughts on how to, if anyone wants to do high production laser cutting, because that's what I believe most of his kits are, which I have a bunch of them. So
Yeah, I'm sorry. What were you asking there, Ed? My thoughts on
getting your thoughts on since Bob is only doing like hobby stuff, basically what if somebody wants to go into production like what you do, what are your thoughts on for someone who wants to do laser cutting on a production scale?
Well, I only have the one laser that I purchased a few years ago, and it's an Epilog. That's really the only experience I have with laser cutters. My thoughts are, yeah, there's tons of cheap Chinese stuff out there. And I know like Bob's getting some good results, probably from what he's using it. But from a production standpoint, my main concern is something that's durable, and when it breaks, where can I go for tech support? And with Epilogue, their tech support is in Colorado. And while the replacement parts for this laser are not cheap, generally I'll get them the next day. So, there's trade-offs.
Yeah, I mean, I
I've
wanna
actually
make-
been looking at upgrading my laser, or upgrading to a newer laser. I just don't see that's in the cards anytime soon. But sorry, Bob, I think I stepped on you.
No, that's okay. I just want to stress that, this was frankly just done on my part as a lark. I mean, just to, if you just need to have a thing done, I mean, I'll be honest, I have all three. I have filament, I have resin, and I have the laser. Just because I can. So, and I play with them, but I'm not in business. And I'm sure that any of the units that I have would not be used if I were in business. So, Jim, it might be interesting to approach Nick Massey again and see if he'll do another session for
Yeah,
us.
I was just thinking about that, Bob.
All right.
Anybody else? Bob, thank you so very much. I really do appreciate you tonight.
Very welcome.